This is a show about the worst case scenario, the mistakes we bury and the fear we run from. Every founder falls. It's time we finally talked about it.
The difference between good entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs and non-successful ones is in those types of situations, in that crisis, being able to pivot. And a lot of times having to pivot away from what your passion is in order to save the ship.
Welcome to the fall. Today, I've got a very special guest on the show. His name is Darren Dunn. I just found out about the full name for the first time today. But Darren and I have actually known each other, since the late 90s. Yep. And, Darren's been an integral part of my own entrepreneurial journey. And really, I think my journey towards becoming an adult as well.
Oh boy.
Fun fact, although I didn't work for Darren was the first and only person ever to fire me from a job. But anyway, welcome, my friend, Darren. You're like family to me. It's great to have you on the fall.
Craig, great to be here. I really like what you're doing with this podcast, because this is the ugly parts that you don't hear founders talking about at the bar.
Yeah, no, for sure. If we can give people a little bit of comfort in order to take some risks and know that, we've all experienced worse things and at the end of the day, we've survived. But I think giving people some comfort just talking about some of those things that we've experienced will help. I know your story, or at least a chunk of your story, but I don't know the whole thing. So there's a lot that we have done together, but certainly there's a lot to your story that I'm not familiar with, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it today.
Sure.
Why don't you tell us what you're up to today? Let's start with what you're working on.
Sure. I am the co-founder of a company called Zartico. I am not actively participating in the day-to-day anymore with that company, although I still own a huge chunk of it, so have every interest in their success. That was started in 2019, and it's a analytics and insights company that is focused on the destination space. So think about tourism. With the advent of speed and data and big data, and eventually AI, we were able to bring big macro data sets like credit card information, geolocation data, so we can see where travelers are coming from, where they're visiting, how long they're staying at certain areas, how much they're spending per day, whether or not people from Chicago like steak dinners versus people from Phoenix that might like Mexican dinners. All while keeping the information private, so we don't know who these people are.
You've been in the travel industry for a really long time. How did that come about? I remember at iPromotions, you also had some travel clients.
Well, it actually started, so iPromotions was acquired by 24/7 Media, which is where I met Craig. Honest to God, I got a call from the state of Louisiana, and it was in early June, and they said they wanted to try online advertising. And I had really, a tourism bureau is not something I even thought of. And I'm like, okay, great, how much? And they said $650,000. Can you burn it in a month? And I was like, not a problem, not a problem. There was nobody serving online advertising to this industry. My first convention that I went to, called the Southeast Tourism Society, which was in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2001. I went to the convention. I was the only one selling online ads there. Everything else was like pamphlets, brochures, newspaper inserts. It was all the old media guys, and then there was me talking about the future and getting on stage and telling everybody the future of travel and tourism is online, and you're falling on deaf ears. What's interesting about that is I flew home after speaking at that conference, and that was September 10th, 2001. that I came home. And September 11th happened the next day.
Wow.
About 2 weeks later, I was down in New York, not as, as you know, nothing going on down there. And I was up in our office on the 27th floor, 24th floor, and just sitting in the office, and all of a sudden my giant black desk phone rings. And all of a sudden this guy gets on the phone, he's like, Darren. I said, yeah. And he goes, Chuck Benelli, Southeast Tourism Society. I said, hey, Chuck, what's going on? He goes, we have all been so worried about you. He said, well, you got up on stage and you talked about, the future of travel and tourism being online. He goes, where's your head at now? And I kind of looked and I said, well, I'm not quite sure, Chuck. There's tanks on the street right now down below my office. I'm not sure what the travel forecast is going to look like, let alone online. And he said, if you choose to stick by tourism during this time, tourism will always stick by you. And I'm not kidding you, Craig. I hung up the phone, knew what the focus of my professional life was going to be. Here I am, 25 years later, still working in that industry.
Tell us where you're from and where you grew up and what kind of family situation you had growing up.
Sure. I grew up in a very small town in Montana called Florence, which is south of Missoula, if you know the state whatsoever. Our town literally had no stoplights, 4 bars, a grocery store, a post office, and one church for everybody. And I graduated with 26 kids in my class, and that was the biggest class to date in that school. Grew up on a ranch, a hobby ranch by Montana standards, and raised cattle, raised horses. Although my mom and dad were both professionals, so it wasn't our main source of income. And my dad sold Allstate insurance. My mom's a microbiologist. It taught me a lot in preparing me for being an entrepreneur. When you think of the cowboy out on the range by himself, that's how you feel a lot as an entrepreneur. When you grow up there, and especially when you look back now, it seems crazy, but everything's life or death. You don't feed the cattle, they die. Their calves die. You don't water the crops right, they don't grow, they don't yield. That's the kind of work ethic that's instilled in you. And you're many times in a situation where you can't rely on others. You gotta figure it out for yourself. You've got 2 feet of wire and a 6-foot gap in the fence. What are you gonna do? It was Little House on the Prairie.
Wow, sounds idyllic.
Yeah, it was. It was a good childhood.
So tell me, early mentors. So people that had an influence on you as you were growing up in this small town of Florence, and then your early career. Like, who were some of the mentors that you had?
Growing up, certainly my father and mother, and the work ethic, morals, et cetera, that they instilled to build a foundation for me to go out in life. Probably my biggest one during my formative years, call it high school, would be my high school basketball coach. His name was Don Holst. We didn't have the best team in my 4 years at Florence High School, but we had the team that with the best chemistry, and they play well together. And we ended up being the first team to make it to the state tournament in the school's history. And it wasn't that we were super skilled. It's just that the machine worked well. The whole was bigger than the sum of the parts, right? No matter how good we got, we were always one loss away, one day away from losing all that. So never rest on your laurels, and you have to keep innovating and getting better as the season goes on. So it really just taught me a lot of discipline, teamwork, leadership, compassion. One of my early mentors at a small company out of Seattle called iPromotions, later acquired by 24/7, his name is Brian Heathman. He taught me a lot of discipline and humility. I was a young buck. It was it was the first run up of the .com era, so late 90s. And, IPO after IPO, everybody was raising money. He disciplined me into making sure we ran a very effective business that was profitable. And yes, we did take on some money, but very little comparatively, and managed to have an exit. And while that exit wasn't financially beneficial really to us because of the way we structured the finance, it did give us a job for the next 4 years. While every other division at 24/7 Media was getting cut, we survived. Brian never let me get caught up in the hype of the internet boom and all this, all this gaming money of BCs and IPOs. So he taught me the importance of that and really how to run a sales team for the first time.
You said that when you sold the company to 24/7 Media, it wasn't as lucrative as a windfall for you and Brian as you maybe had hoped for. And you said something about the structure of the way that you guys did raise the money. Tell us more about that. What got in the way of it being a windfall for you?
One was the timing of it, and literally we sold. We were talking to DoubleClick, L90, some of the big ad networks. They were all bidding on the company. Times were good, and then all of a sudden the internet it started taking a nosedive.
You're talking about the .com bubble being burst. It was starting to burst in what, 99, 2000? We were starting to see signs.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden we went from sitting back smoking cigars trying to choose our deal to, oh my God, we got to get this thing sold because it's a lot of money to sell a company, as you know. So we structured the deal. Basically, the investors got the cash and we got stock. And so the deal with 24/7 that we ended up executing was half cash and half stock, single digit millions, but we were happy to get out with that. So the investors got all the cash, we got a ton of stock, and God, I looked brilliant on paper for 24 hours. And I celebrated like it. I was completely underwater the next day, and then decided, okay, I'm not getting rich on the stock. I got to make this division work and stay profitable, because the next thing we were looking at is huge layoffs, 300-400 employees at a time. The rise up and then the downturn of the internet was new to all of us back then. The market was hyper driven, a bubble. None of us had, or even our elders really had anything to prepare us for what we might be looking at. It switched from a celebration to, okay, now we have to survive. And I don't want to be the division getting cut. And it was honestly, that happened overnight. Flipping into that survival mode, it's also, I think as entrepreneurs, one of the reasons you build is you're very passionate about your idea, about your company. I mean, that's all you have is passion. At first, you certainly don't have money. The difference between good entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs and non-successful ones is in those types of situations, in that crisis, being able to pivot, and a lot of times having to pivot away from what your passion is in order to save the ship. My very first company, which was a film and video production company, and we were quite lucky and were very successful early on. It was before Hallmark cornered the Christmas market, and everything was direct to home video. We were on Entertainment Tonight, Extra, and all these programs for sale in every Walmart, Target in the country, and the film ended up being all over the world. So we had all this momentum, and I was so I was going to be a filmmaker. I was going to make holiday films. We're having tons of requests for filming professional events and weddings and so forth. And I'm like, no, that's not us. We're artists. We are artists. We are Christmas artists. gosh, we could have done so much of that so early. We could have been so successful, but the passion got in the way of what was a very necessary pivot to keep food on the table.
So how long did you stay at 24/7 Media from the time that iPromotions got acquired until you left? How long was that?
2002 or 2003, uh, they were looking at chopping night promotions out of 24/7. And so we executed a management buyout and actually bought it back. At that time, the travel thing was working very well. I was very passionate about tourism. iPromotions was just focused on that. And again, we had the opportunity to pivot into so many other verticals and really make that company much stronger and survive. And I was just like, no, tourism, no, tourism, no, tourism. That gives you founderitis, which is you can't see the forest through the trees. You need some objectivity and somebody to kick some sense into you to say, hey, there's a lot of other ways. The important part is keeping the company alive. Your passion is selfish at the end of the day. So they sold it back to us, and then we ran it for, I don't know, maybe a year or more, and we ended up selling it to a direct marketing company out of Toronto called Digital Connections, which I think basically over the course of the next year got phased out, and their sales team took over. Didn't really make any money, but kept the company alive. And 2 months after that, I ended up going to work with and for a guy I actually had to let go from 24/7.
I remember that. Barry Diller IAC.
Yeah, B Diddy days.
That was fun. We got the gang back together again.
There was a ton of M&A going on. We had 16 search engines under Barry Diller, plus Expedia and TripAdvisor, which was great for me.
Ticketmaster, Evite. We had a lot of prime real estate.
Yeah, whatever the big dating company was at the time.
Match.com.
Match.com, the shopping channel.
Lending Tree.
Yeah, it was a huge empire. It just, his dream was really to somehow coalesce and bring all that together. And it was just near impossible. A lot of egos involved, to the point where Expedia finally spun out on their own with TripAdvisor, and the thing just kind of broke up, slowly fell apart, as you know, because you left before I did.
Eventually, I think you wound up at Orbitz, right?
Yeah, I did. 2006, I ended up going to Orbitz, followed some IAC people there, Jeff Ham, Josh Winkler. It was an amazing part of my career. I got to head up all of their tourism forum, and we operated 24/7 in IAC. I was the guy and worked through the other salespeople until I built it up to a point where we needed separate sales teams. But my first territory was the Caribbean, Mexico, and Hawaii. And that's basically all I did was travel to those places. It was,
Wow.
it was amazing. Yeah. And you work for a travel agency, so everywhere you go, you're getting the best of everything. They don't let you see anything bad. So best seats on the plane, best rooms in the hotel. It was a nice time. It was a fun ride for a couple of years. Late in 2008, the economy started taking a turn, and I was admittedly doing a very poor job of managing up to my boss at Orbitz, and I think it was quite threatening to her. That was the first job I ever lost, was at Orbitz, and it taught me some really valuable lessons. And that, when you're in a big corporate environment like that you need to work full time on managing up.
Define managing up, Darren. What does that mean to you?
Making sure your superior looks good all the time. My superior was kind of having battles with other divisions of the company, and I needed other divisions of that company to accomplish some things. So, I was doing things around them, instead of managing up and through them.
And what was going on in your life at the time, and what was that like?
I was dating a girl that I was pretty sure I was going to marry. She actually worked with us at IAC as well. Unfortunately, she got let go right about the same time. I think I was approaching 40 by then. It's the first time that like I wasn't just getting another job. It wasn't coming. A month went by. Um, she wasn't working. I'm supposed to be impressing this young lady to, like I wanted to marry her, and things were just falling apart. I was falling apart personally because I had never dealt with this. I was like, "What do you mean I don't have a job? I'm the best in the world at what I do." Uh, and at that time, especially with the economy where it was from '08 to 11, really, it became very difficult. I never understood what not having a job was, or having a
You're
hard
talking
time
about the
finding a
Great
job.
Recession of 2008.
Yeah, yeah. So companies weren't hiring, and I was finally to that place in my career, and I tell this to a lot of people coming up through their careers. I said, as you go on in your career, you become more and more valuable to fewer and fewer people, which makes it harder and harder to find a job. It takes what took you in your late 20s, early 30s, takes you 2 months to find a new job. But all of a sudden you have all this experience, you cost a lot more. And even if you're willing to work for less, they're like, you'll be bored and you'll be gone in a year. Or, the person hiring you is like, you're much better than I am. This is a crap economy. There's no way I'm bringing you in here. It was the first time I had ever dealt with that. Very humbling. Yeah, it really scared me. It really scared me. So Amy and I ended up uh, moved in with her mom and dad down in Florida, which wasn't a bad thing, I guess, but still not the ideal trail I wanted to be on in terms of my life plans and getting married and everything else I wanted to do back then. And I took a job with an Israeli company called WorldMate, and that ended up moving me to San Francisco. And I looked at Amy and said, "You can come if you want," but I'm like, I got to take this job because I had that's the first time in my life I ever dealt with actual depression as well. I mean, I had no idea what depression was, but uh, or what the signs were, and nobody really trains you for that. You don't hear about it, but all of a sudden, I didn't want to go out and be around people. I didn't want to see anybody. I just wanted to stay inside all day. And that felt normal to me. Like the thought of going outside scared me to death. And better than anybody, I'm a people person. It was getting that job, getting another job, and going to work for an Israeli company, which was all new to me, and getting to go to Tel Aviv and really experience a new culture. And they have a great startup and tech community in Tel Aviv. And so that was really fun to be part of, which led to another job.
How long between the time that you got let go from Orbitz and the time that you took the job at WorldMate?
It was about 9 to 12 months. And I don't think Amy, of course, ended up going to San Francisco with me. I don't think she got employed until well after we were out there. I mean, it's it set us back years. It set us back years. Nothing had prepared me for that. Uh, for that, I didn't know how to handle it. Like I said, it led to some not so good places. All my worth, self worth, was wrapped up in my job, my companies, my teams, and all of a sudden I had none of that. None of it. I didn't really have. That's how I measured what I was worth to anybody, what I was accomplishing out there. And so I didn't have, I didn't have a measuring stick anymore and had to rely on others. Very humbling. Amy and I gave up on having kids, and we both just sunk ourselves into work. She was at Facebook, dealing with the whole Russian scandal over there, and I was just on airplanes every chance I got, and got a bit burnout. That was when I was at a company called Adara, and I had brought a product to market over there for tourism entities called Impact, and it was very successful all over the world. And but something in me just kept telling me it's not going to last. It's not going to last. In 2018, I was actually trying to quit. I was just done, burnout, and I was convinced that if I was ever going to work that hard again, I was going to do it for myself.
Have you had other times in your life where you've had depression? Is that something that you've battled more than just the one time?
Yes. Uh, yeah, probably. Certainly over the past few years, for sure. Not not depression so much as just a ton of anxiety. Anxiety to the point where I'd be in a meeting with somebody and I'd have to get up and leave and go walk around and calm myself down. I don't know why I was having the anxiety. I just was, and which just kind of exasperates itself in terms of then you're not sleeping well, and we took on $30 million in funding, a lot of things keeping me up at night. And then after five years at 5 years plus at Zartico, I decided to leave. And honestly, they didn't need me anymore. I was an expensive line item, very expensive line item. And even when I look back at whether it be the example I gave you at iPromotions or the example I gave you from the production company, 0 to 10, I'm awesome at it. But 11 to 50, that takes a lot of times it takes a lot different looking at employees, as well as leadership. For the first time in my life, I had the maturity to see that, and so I stepped aside and felt really good about it, and then I felt really bad about it.
Is this relating to the anxiety that you're talking about? Is that
Yeah,
part?
yeah, some of it's that's part of it, but I think anxiety. That's when anxiety started turning to depression, and was after I left, and idle hands are the devil's playground, and all of a sudden I had nothing to do, nobody relied on me. I was going back to that place I was years before, right? 2025 was kind of really about contractually, I couldn't really work. Thankfully, with the investment and so forth, was able as a founder to pull some secondary out, and had plenty of runway. And my contracts really, I couldn't poach, I couldn't compete, couldn't do really anything. So that's when I started consulting for all these other startups and trying to keep myself busy and motivated. But 2025 was really, that was about trying to pull me out of the nosedive of 2024. And took about a year. And, I feel like I'm at cruising altitude again, and looking for new opportunities, feeling really good about myself. I feel like I'm back.
I didn't know that you battled with depression. I didn't know that about it in 2008, and I didn't know about it in 2024 and in the future. I know it's hard to reach out to people, but I don't love that I didn't know. I wish that I could have been there for you.
Thank you. I think, especially the older you are, there's certainly some stigma around mental health. And, when you're a leader and a founder, you don't you don't want people seeing that part of you. I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle. It might be anxiety, it might be depression, it might be something else. But mental health is a big part of and making sure you maintain that. There's no shame in the game. And I think the more as entrepreneurs and founders we're able to say, hey, it's okay. This conversation right here where you're like, I wish I knew. Um, Reach out to your other entrepreneur friends and ask the following question: are you okay?
If you could share some words with anyone who might be listening to this, founder or otherwise, who's struggling with depression or with feelings of anxiety or self-doubt, or what advice could you offer them?
Don't be afraid to share. I think one of the big things is you'll just be surprised at how many people will understand. And I know me, um, I I started actually sharing that I was struggling, and people could see it. I couldn't eat, a lot of things going on. And I had a really good friend who's been with the company for 5 years. He was founder over there, and he all of a sudden he goes, "I'm I'm just taking 3 or 4 months off for my mental health." And I was like, "Wow." And he goes, and he told me, he goes, "Yes, I inspired it," and I was like, "I'm sorry." uh, so I think confiding in your fellow entrepreneurs, your family, sometimes it's very, uh, if your family's looking at you for leadership and income, sometimes it's they're not the easiest one to share with about it. So find others and figure out who your true friends are. And again, it's incumbent on all of us in this day and age to ask the question: are you okay? How can I support you? Is there anything I can do? You want to chat? You want to get together? That's the question that doesn't get asked. And if it doesn't get asked, that's how you lose people, because sometimes it just takes getting through a day.
Darren, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really do
Yeah.
appreciate you opening up and sharing your experiences with me and our listeners. And I feel very comfortable and confident knowing that somebody is going to find your advice and your story
Thank you.
to be helpful in their journey. So really
I
appreciate
appreciate
you.
it. And anybody who happens to listen to this, please feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to talk to you about anything because I've been there.